Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to HR for UK's Friday Furlough webinar. Today I have got so much information that I want to share with you, but it also feels like such a long time since I've been in the seat delivering my webinar to you. So I'm sure that it's a bit like a child getting back on their bike. I have no doubt that I will need to remind myself on what we need to do. So please do bear with me if there are any glitches or any gremlins that sneak in along the way. But today's webinar is going to, of course, be very topical. We've had a very interesting week in terms of new measures that have been introduced by the government. We've had some new schemes that have been introduced, and of course we've had some more guidance notes on the Kickstart scheme, which I'm busting to share with you. I'm just going to, before I even start, I'm just going to, I can see that there are still people busy logging on at the moment, so I'll give them a few more minutes to get back on. I'm sure many of them, a bit like me, need to remember and be reminded on what they need to do to be able to view this webinar. So I will just give it another few more seconds, and then I will kickstart. I'll excuse the pun, but I'll kickstart and I'll get started with today's webinar. Okay, today's Friday the 25th of September. Where has the time gone? It feels like autumn. I'm sure across the country, no matter where you are looking out the window, wanting to draw those curtains early, and certainly whilst driving today, the wind was blowing the leaves everywhere. So it's a clear sign that we are starting to get into autumn. But today's webinar is the end of furlough and what comes next. So just as a quick reminder, HR for UK, who are we? HR for UK is a leading provider for HR and employment support. We also provide payroll and pension support, as well as health and safety. We've got over 30 years of experience. We've got some fantastic 5-star reviews on our website for you to go and have a look at. I'm incredibly proud of how HR for UK has been able to help clients and companies through this crisis. We've been in it for 6 months. 6 months ago, we were looking at, this is only going to be 12 weeks, but certainly, as we've heard from the Prime Minister earlier in the week, that we are certainly looking at measures to continue for at least, the next 6 months. So we're definitely going to be in this for the long haul. But do go and look at our website, www.hrforuk.com, and read the reviews for yourself, and you can make your own decision as to whether or not we have provided the promised services that we have. Brilliant, Michelle, thank you very much. I can see some questions coming in. Yes, you will be able to ask questions this time. The previous webinar, unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we had to cancel. And of course, the prior webinar touched a nerve with the disgruntled ex-employees from British Airways, and to protect everybody, we took off their questions. But of course, this week we're back to normal, so please do put your questions in the question box on the side. So Michelle, hold on to that thought. I will come back to your question as soon as I get there. So just a brief reminder of who I am. So in case anybody's forgotten, I'm an HR and employment law solicitor, and I am the Managing Director of HR for UK, and I am responsible for HR for UK's role as a leading professional service for businesses in the UK. My vision, it has been and continues to be, is to help your business survive this pandemic crisis by providing you with clear, professional, practical advice and support. And that continues. My help and support is not going to stop once the crisis is over. More so, I'll be here to help you as your businesses then start to grow, which I'm sure they will do. So let's just have a quick look at what we are going to cover today. So as it has been for the last couple of months, it's not going to be the same without a furlough update. I'm sure that there will only be one more update after this. Do hold on to that. But I am going to have a look at the new job support scheme, what it is and how it's going to work, how you claim for it. I'm also going to talk about the Kickstart scheme, what it is, how it works, and how do you put in an application. And I'm also going to spend probably a few minutes at the end before I go on to the questions, just giving you a few tips of what you should be looking at now and how you can use the schemes that the government has provided to help you through the next 6 months and beyond, because we do know that we are entering into some very challenging times. As I've already mentioned, please do use the question box to ask questions, to discuss your business concerns. These webinars are only as helpful and useful by the questions that you provide us. And of course, it doesn't have to be only about today's webinar. It can be about things that I've covered before or things that you would like me to cover in future webinars. So please do use that question box, and I look forward to answering your questions when we get to the end. Don't feel pressured to put the questions in today. You can always email questions into us. The email address is info@hrforuk.com. You can, of course, always go to our website and fill out a contact us form, which is www.hrforuk.com. Or, of course, you can give us a call and speak to one of our expert advisors who will be able to give you some help and support. The contact telephone number is 01455 444 222. Heather, I've just seen your question pop up. I can just see the first part of it saying that we're having problems with audio. I'm talking it out aloud so that my technical people who are supporting me can have a look into that, and hopefully we will be able to get that resolved very shortly for you. We do make a recording of this webinar, so if you do continue to have audio issues, don't worry, you won't miss out because you will get a recording of this webinar for you. So let's get on to today's discussions. So we all know that on Tuesday the Prime Minister announced new ranges of measures to try and reduce the spread and the reproduction of the COVID-19. Over the last fortnight, hospitals have started to see a significant increase in admissions. It has certainly doubled, and of course, as we start to approach those winter months, that is going to increase. As I've already mentioned, the government's expectation is that these measures that they have implemented may remain in place for at least 6 months. So I think we're in for quite a tough time. And one of the key ones that came out, which affects businesses, is the message has almost changed within 2 weeks. First of all, of course, we know it was stay at home, work from home. And only come into the office if you really have to, or in the workplace if you really have to, or the work can't be done from home. The message then changed very recently to, it's quite safe for you to go back to work and you should go back to work. But that message very quickly changed after only 2 weeks of businesses being able to continue to work from the workplace to the message now is to work from home if you can. So it really is this flip-flop between advice and guidance, but we always need to follow the government's guidance, because the guidance that they do give out, of course, is substantiated by the science behind it. I'm not a scientist, I'm not going to go into it, but every time there is an announcement, it does have an impact on business owners trying to manage businesses and, of course, their employees and looking after their health and well-being. But yesterday, we know that the Chancellor introduced new measures to support jobs and the economy, and he introduced the new job support scheme. The new job support scheme will replace the current job retention scheme. And the government repeatedly referred to measures aimed at keeping staff on that have been furloughed. It's about keeping people in employment. And it's about making sure that the jobs that there are viable jobs. So there were quite a few keywords that kept coming out of, the announcements and the sort of reporting that came in after that is very much about keeping people in work and making sure that those people who are in work are in viable jobs. There is, of course, the job retention bonus scheme that is still available, and that is a one-off payment of £1,000 payment for each employee who has been furloughed, who remains in meaningful employment up to the end of January. So, you know, quite a lot going on. So this is going to be quite an intense webinar, but hopefully you'll be able to go away from it with a fountain of knowledge and know what you need to do next. So let's have a quick look at an update at the furlough scheme. So we're now well into September. We are on the flexible furlough scheme. You may still have some people who are permanently furloughed. But from Thursday next week, we have the final step change before the scheme comes to an end. So we are now entering into that final phase of the furlough scheme. So what will happen from the 1st of October is the government will be reducing its level of contribution towards pay. So from the 1st of October, the government will only be paying 80% of wages, which means employers will now need to contribute 20% of wages to make sure that employees still receive at least 80% of their wages for their furloughed hours. In other words, the hours that they do not currently work. So of course, the hours that they do work, they will receive full pay. The government cap will also reduce, and this will reduce to £1,875 per month per employee, and that is what can be claimed as a maximum under the scheme. Don't forget that that cap is for their furlough hours, and that is for the hours that the employee does not work. I've had a question from Dilesh. Dilesh, I will come back to you. Did I mean 60%? Yes, I thought I said 60%. Just to recap, the government will be reducing the level of support, and they will only be paying 60% of wages. Employers will have to pay 20%, so that employees continue to get 80%. So it's a 60 plus a 20 equals the 80. And of course, the cap is proportional to the hours not worked. So it doesn't mean that the employee can automatically get that cap you know, the maximum cap. It is proportionate to the hours that they don't work. Of course, employers must still pay at least 80% of wages for the hours that they don't work. And of course, employers must make a payment for the national insurance contributions, the employer national insurance contributions, as well as the employer pension contributions. So again, not much has changed there, excepting that step change in terms of the government contribution and of course the increased contribution that employers need to make towards the furloughed hours. Something that has been coming back quite a lot from Hmrc, and sort of the feedback that we get, is to make sure that your data is correct. It's really, really important that you provide Hmrc with the correct data that they need to be able to process your claim. Payment of your grant may be delayed or at risk if you don't submit all the correct information at the time. So if you make a submission that is incorrect or only has part of the information, your all-important grant money will be delayed. So make sure that you have the correct data when you are submitting those claims. If you have, by any chance, made a mistake, we are all human. This is uncharted territory. You know, mistakes can be made, and in fact do get made. But it is important that if you have made a mistake, if you have claimed too much in error, that you make sure that you rectify that. So it's important that you continue to check every single claim that you make that it is accurate. Don't automatically assume because the claim that you made previously was correct that the claim that you are currently making is going to be correct as well. Make sure that the data you are using is correct to make sure that the claim itself is correct, so that you can avoid you know, that delay. But more importantly, you can avoid having unnecessary penalties for claiming too much. So if you have claimed too much through the coronavirus job retention scheme and you have not repaid it, you should notify Hmrc as soon as possible and repay that money. And I'm going to set out some guidelines when those payment dates need to be. So if you have made an error and you have claimed too much and you've not yet repaid it, you must repay the money, whichever is the latest, by the following dates. So 90 days from the time when you actually received the money that you are not entitled to, so within 90 days, or within 90 days at the point where circumstances have changed, where you are no longer entitled to keep the grant. So again, 90 days from the time where the circumstances have changed, where you are no longer entitled to keep that grant. Or the 20th of October, if on or before the 22nd of July, you received monies that you were not entitled to. Of course, if you received monies after that point, it's the 90 days that will apply. But if you received monies on or before the 22nd of July that you weren't really entitled to claim, you must make sure that that is paid by the 20th of October. If you don't do this, Hmrc will be charging interest. You will have to pay interest, but of course there will also be those penalties as well as repaying the excess on the grant. But more importantly, what you don't want to have is the PR nightmare that will come out of it if you end up being on that named and shamed list. So, you know, your name and brand is so important and you work so hard to maintain it. Don't let something like this turn around and bite you on the bum. So make sure that if you have got grants that you're not entitled to, you do make those payments. So how do you let Hmrc know if you have claimed too much? You can do this in a number of ways. The first way that you can do it as part of your next online claim. So you can let Hmrc know through your next claim. The system will prompt you to add the details if you have received too much. If you have claimed too much and you don't plan to make any further claims, then you should contact Hmrc to find out how much you need to repay and how you can make that repayment online. So Hmrc are there to help and support you. They are tackling serious fraud. We have seen it in the public domain. It has been in the news where you know, they have come down hard on organisations and directors for you know, making fraudulent claims. So make sure that you're not one of those people, and you are make sure that you are compliant and keep everything above board. As I said, of course, Hmrc understands that mistakes can happen. You know, sometimes when we're in a hurry, we miskey something. Hmrc are not going to be penalising people. They're not going to be looking for, you know, penalising people for innocent mistakes and errors and making small mistakes on compliance. They are really interested in tackling that serious fraud. But it is your responsibility to make sure that any claims that are made are accurate and correct. Also, something that has been fed back in recent weeks is that there are lots of scams going around. So make sure that you protect yourself and don't fall into, you know, being scammed. Scammers are very intuitive. They are very creative in making their scams look very much like it is coming from Hmrc or from a legal department, perhaps within the government. So do be mindful when you do receive emails. Do make sure that there are genuine emails that are coming from the genuine recipient, and don't get caught up in these scams. So let's have a look at the job support scheme. This is the scheme that was introduced by the Chancellor on Thursday, so yesterday. Seems like a long time ago. I've had to try and get my head around it. So, you know, the Chancellor set out the new job retention measures in his statement yesterday. Of course, the devil is in the detail. Between his announcement yesterday and what we know today, quite a lot of that detail has come through, but I do fear that we may end up being in that flip-flop situation where we were sort of back in March, where the changes came through. So until it is actually legislation, what I'm going to be sharing with you at the moment is guidance, but hopefully we will get that all-important legislation which crystallises what the scheme actually means and what it does. So we all know that the furlough scheme will come to an end as planned on the 31st of October. Obviously, the government cannot continue to keep jobs open, you know, basically on the furlough scheme. We cannot save every single job, but what we do need to do is try and protect the jobs that can be saved, if at all possible. And support now really is needed to get people back into work, working from home. You know, we know that there are other measures in place, which I'm not going to detract from, but the new job support scheme is a scheme to try and support people in work. So it's giving employers the option to keep people on shorter hours rather than making them redundant. So it is slightly different to the furlough scheme, and it does get quite complicated. So for all those payroll providers out there, I think you're going to need to get your thinking caps on how this is going to be calculated and managed. But employees will have to work at least 1/3 of their normal hours, and they will be paid for that 1/3 of their hours by their employer. The government will then top up 2/3 of the salary. This was the verbal statement that came from the House of, in the House of Commons yesterday. But as I say, the information that has come through since then, we have been able to drill down a little bit more. So all SMEs, so small and medium-sized enterprises, are eligible. Larger businesses are eligible, but they will have to provide evidence and demonstrate that their turnover has fallen as a result of COVID-19. Whereas SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, will not need to provide evidence of that. The scheme is open to all employees, even if they were not previously furloughed. So this is really great for businesses who didn't use the furlough scheme but are now finding that actually they do need to perhaps reduce those hours. They will be able to use the job support scheme. I'm going to get confused with all these scheme names. The scheme will be open and operational for 6 months. So the new scheme starts on the 1st of November and will come to an end after 6 months, so April 2021. So what is the job support scheme? So the job support scheme is designed to protect viable jobs in businesses who are facing lower demand as the winter months approach us and are going to have a particular impact as a result of COVID-19, to make sure that they can keep their employees attached to the workforce. The company will continue to pay the employees for the hours that they do work, but the burden of hours that are not worked is going to be split between the employer and the government. So through the government, it's going to be through the support scheme, and through the employee, it's going to be through a wage reduction through the reduced hours, and the employee will keep their jobs. Now that the economy is opening up, of course, the target is on those businesses that need it the most, and focusing on those that have been impacted by the coronavirus, and those who can support their employees by doing some work but need more time to recover as the demand increases over the next period of time. So as I say, the government will pay 1/3 of hours not worked, and again, there will be a cap. And the employer will also continue contributing. This will ensure that employees will earn a minimum of 77% of their normal wages. So it is a slight reduction on the 80% that they have become accustomed to earning. So again, employees might feel this pinch with this new scheme that is being introduced. Employers using the scheme will also be able to make the claim for the job retention bonus. Don't forget that bonus is the £1,000 that you will be able to claim if the furloughed employee remains in employment until the 31st of January, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. And as I said earlier, the job support scheme will open on the 1st of November and will run for 6 months. So who is eligible? I've already identified that this is open to SMEs and to larger organisations, although that there is the burden on larger organisations to demonstrate that they have actually suffered as a result of COVID-19 and there is a reduction in their turnover. But any employer in the UK with a UK bank account and operates a PAYE scheme can claim for the grant. neither the employer nor the employee needs to have been part of the job retention scheme, so under the previous furlough scheme. So that is a real bonus and a real benefit for employers, that this is a new scheme and you can participate even if you haven't used any of the other schemes previously. For employees, employees must be on your PAYE, on your payroll on or before the 23rd of September. And I know when I read this, I was thinking it would have been nice to have known that before the 23rd of September. And what it means, again, like it was with the furlough scheme, real-time information must be submitted to Hmrc, notifying that payment has been made to that employee on or before the 23rd of September. So anybody who's joining your organisation, perhaps you know, today or the beginning of October, will not be able to participate in the new scheme. It will only be to existing jobs and existing people who have been on your payroll on or before the 23rd of September. There must be the support for employees, that there must be a viable job. It must be a job that is going to be able to provide work for employees for at least 33% of their usual working hours. So if it is a job that is just hanging on and clinging on by, you know, an edge, trying to find the right word, if it's a job that is just clinging on, that may not survive, you should really give serious consideration whether you want to use this scheme to support an employee in that particular role, because there will be consequences as a result of that. Because if you will not be able to make an employee redundant if they are on the job support scheme. So you will need to be thinking really carefully, and I am going to touch on this a little bit later, really carefully on whether this job is going to survive the next 6 months, and whether you are going to be able to offer your employee at least 33% of their normal working hours. Also, you need to consider whether you are going to be able to, from a financial point of view, to be able to make that additional contribution, because your contribution will increase quite significantly under this new scheme. So quite a lot of information that you will need to sort of have a look, digest and assess and analyse to see whether the scheme really is going to be able to work for you. It's a brilliant scheme if it is going to work, but I want all clients and anybody who's listening to this to go into the scheme with their eyes wide open, knowing what the potential consequences are going to be of it. So employees, again, will be able to cycle on and off of the scheme. So again, there will be that flexibility, and they will be able to be working. They don't have to work the same shift pattern each month, but each short working time arrangement must cover a minimum of 7 days. So you might think that actually for 7 days, I'm only going to have them working for 1/3, so the 33% of their hours, but for the second week they might be working more than that, and they will not be able to work less than that. So again, you might have a combination of their working hours to benefit from it, and that period must be for a minimum of 7 days. So the government will also assess the scheme after 3 months, and they will consider whether they need to increase the minimum hours threshold. So we know for the first 3 months it will be the 33%, you know, 1/3. After 3 months, the government is going to assess that. So it may well be that that threshold is increased over at that point in time. So again, when we're looking at whether you will be able to accommodate that, do bear in mind that the government support, you know, the increase in hours might have an impact on that. So what does the grant cover? The grant will always cover work hours that the employee can't work. So again, the grant will cover both the government contribution. The employer will pay 1/3 and the government will pay 1/3 of the usual working hours. The government contribution will be capped, so that cap is at £697.92 per month per employee. The grants will be made in arrears, and you will be reimbursed. So the employer will be reimbursed the government contribution. So again, as an employer, you will need to front that cost up front, and it will be a reimbursement. So again, from a cash flow point of view, you will need to make sure that you will be able to satisfy that. Unlike the current furlough scheme, you could make that claim so as it coincides with your current payroll run. With the new scheme, it will be a reimbursement. So you will need to make that payment up front and claim the money back afterwards. The grant will not cover national insurance or pension contributions, so that will remain the employer's responsibility to make that payment. Usual wages calculations will be similar to what we used under the coronavirus job retention scheme. Employees who have previously been furloughed will have the underlying usual pay, their usual hours to calculate the wages, not the amount that was being paid while they were on furlough. So you've got to go back to what you were looking at their pay prior to we went into the furlough scheme and the various schemes that have been in place since then. So it's going back to pre-COVID salaries. So we're going to go back to having a look at what the usual wages constituted prior to this change, and that's what the calculation is going to be on. So employers must pay their employees for their contracted hours, so their wages for their normal worked hours. The expectation is that employers cannot top up employees' wages to the 2/3, and hours not worked will be at their own expense. So again, if you are going to be asking employees to work more, it is going to be at the employer's own expense. Okay, so again, that is going to be a cost to you and your business. So what does it mean to be on reduced hours? So we've already worked out that we know that the employee must work at least 33 hours of their usual hours. Time worked that they do work must be paid at their usual hours. The time not worked, the employee will be paid 2/3 of their usual wage. So you can already see from a payroll point of view, you're going to be having the hours worked, you're going to be having 2/3 of this, the government scheme, you're going to be having 2/3 of what which is going to be split, what the employer is going to be paying, what the government is going to be paying. So it's going to be quite complicated and complex separating that all out. The big thing is, and I've said it before and I'm going to reiterate it, is employees cannot be made redundant or be put on notice of redundancy during the time that the employer is making a claim for the grant. So again, you need to make sure that you are not going to be going through redundancy and serving that redundancy notice while you are using the job support scheme. This means that if you are potentially going to be considering redundancies, you are pushing this back to beyond April of 2021. So when you are looking at whether you are going to be able to afford to keep staff on, do bear in mind that we are looking, for quite a considerable period of time. So you do need to make sure that you are going to be able to, fund these, fund the scheme if you are going to be using it. So again, how do you make your claims? The scheme will only be open from the 1st of November to the end of April 2021. Like with the furlough scheme, it will be an online portal where you will be able to make the scheme. It will only be open and available from December 2020 and will be paid in a monthly basis. As I've already mentioned, grants will be paid in arrears. The claim can only be submitted in respect of a given pay period, and payment will be after the employee has been paid. So payment will be reported to Hmrc in the usual way through your RTI submission. Again, Hmrc will be carrying out checks. They will make sure that if there are any fraudulent claims, payments will be withheld. And it will need to be repaid if it is found that the claim has been incorrectly made or you have fraudulently made the claim. As I said before, grants will be reimbursed for wage costs actually incurred. So you won't be able to preempt what they may be. It is actual costs that you have already incurred, which is why it's a reimbursement rather than an upfront payment beforehand. A key thing about using the scheme is that employers must agree the short-time working arrangements with their staff. You've got to make those changes by agreement, and you've also got to make sure that you notify the employee in writing that that agreement has been changed. So this is very similar to a variation of terms. You've got to go through the consultation process with the employee, explaining the reasons why you need to make the changes, what it's going to mean for them, and getting their agreement that they agree to the reduced working hours, because it is going to have a knock-on effect on only getting 77% of their usual wages pre-COVID. Hmrc again have made it very clear that you need to keep the agreement available to Hmrc if they do request upon an audit, where is the agreement. So again, before you get into this, do make sure that you consult with employees to implement this change before you put them onto the job support scheme. And of course, employees will be notified by Hmrc directly of the full details of the claim. So employees, for the first time, will be able to cross-check what you are receiving and what they have received. So again, it's the first time where the employee will actually receive information directly from Hmrc about the grant you as an employer have received in relation to the grant that you have claimed. So let's just have a quick look at as a working example. I'm going to use the name Beth. If I have a Beth in the audience, hello to you. If you know a Beth, you can you can smile and laugh at them. I haven't picked the name for any particular reason, but let's take as an example. Beth normally works 5 days a week, and she earns £350 per week for working those 5 days. Her company is suffering reduced sales as a result of coronavirus, and the company has decided, rather than making Beth redundant, they are going to make use of the job support scheme. And Beth will be working 2 days a week, so she'll be working 40 hours of her usual working hours. So the employer will pay Beth £140 for the days that she's worked. So that's for the 40% for the 2 days. And for the time that she is not working, so in other words, the 3 days, for 60%, that will account for £120. Of that, the government will be making their contribution. So the total earnings that she will receive is £280. It gets complicated. I will share this with you in a worked example as part of the handouts that I will be sending out to you. So the government contribution will be £70. The company contribution will be £70, and that's how we get the £140. Plus, of course, she will get the hours that she has worked. So Beth's employer will be able to support Beth in keeping her in her job. Okay. I can see many of you thinking, what? How does that all work? As I said, don't worry, I will be sending out worked examples to show you how it is going to be calculated. It is quite a complicated split when you start looking at it. So that's the job support scheme. So hopefully I haven't blown your minds too much about it. We will be sending out information, and of course, as soon as we get clear guidance, we will be sending that out. But this is the information that we have at the moment, and I'll always put my caveat out. It is the information that we have at the moment. As and when guidance comes out, and as and when it becomes legislation, and it is passed as a bill and it becomes enforceable, I will of course share that with you. So let's have a quick look at the job retention bonus scheme. So the job retention bonus scheme is only available to previously furloughed employees who have remained in employment and will remain in employment up until the end of January. The job retention bonus is £100 per eligible employee. So what must be met to make sure that you qualify? So the qualifying date is, of course, employers will be able to apply for the one-off bonus payment for each previously previously furloughed employee still in their employment on or after on the 31st of January. And you also need to make sure that the other conditions are met. You will need to provide an RTI return to Hmrc to evidence that that employee is still in employment on the 31st of January 2021. So the other conditions that must be met is the employee must have been properly furloughed. So in other words, the furlough must have been in accordance with the job retention scheme, and of course you must have had that furlough agreement. You must also make sure that the claim for that particular employee has been correctly submitted, and there aren't any overclaimed payments for that particular employee. And the employee must be continuously employed until at least the 31st of January. There must be no breaks of employment during that period of time. Not talking about holiday, I'm talking about break in employment. Okay, so in other words, where there has been that break. The employee must have received an average of at least £520 between the 1st of November and the 31st of January. It doesn't mean that they need to get the £520 each month. It means that across the 3 months, they must have earned at least £1,560. So it might have been less in the earlier months and more as time progressed, but they must at least have, by the time you get to the 31st of January, RTI submissions for the period must at least amount to £1,560. And you must have accurate and up-to-date RTI records for the period up to the 31st of January. So again, that's Hmrc's way of being able to check when you make that claim for that job retention bonus. If an employee has been served notice and they are put my teeth in. So when serving notice, so if, for example, an employee has resigned or they are working out their notice period because of a redundancy situation, if they are serving out their contractual notice, whether it's contractual or statutory, you will not be able to make a claim for that bonus if that notice period falls within the point of the 31st of January. So effectively, an employee does need to go into the February payroll for you to be able to genuinely be able to make that claim. If you are in the redundancy consultation process, so you haven't yet served notice, you will still be able to make that claim for that bonus scheme. So if you are looking at making someone redundant and you do want to make get the benefit of that bonus scheme, do make sure that you are mindful on the point on when you serve that notice. Make sure that it is after the 31st of January so that you can still make sure that you get that claim. So how are you going to be able to get that bonus? So like the other coronavirus job retention scheme payments, you will need to make an application online. The process will only commence in February 2021. So of course details will be published closer to the time on a portal that will be made available through Hmrc to be able to make that claim, because of course it is going to be tying in with employee national insurance numbers and also your RTI. So again, there'll be lots of cross-checking going on to make sure that you are genuinely making a genuine claim for that bonus. As soon as we get those guidance and as soon as we know how to make that claim, we will make sure that you are made aware of that. And of course, bonus payments, like any other payments that are going to be made, can only be sent to a UK bank account. So again, it's making sure that it goes to a UK bank account. Don't forget, from a business point of view, the £1,000 payment is for each successfully furloughed employee. It isn't tax-free. So when you come to declare it, you will need to declare it as income, and you will need to declare it as income when you are calculating taxable profits for corporation tax purposes or for self-employment assessment, self-assessment purposes. So again, yes, you are getting the £1,000, but it is going to have tax consequences, or potentially have tax consequences. So do be mindful of that, but I'm sure getting that bonus will be well worth it. So that's the job bonus scheme, and I'm now going to sort of have a look at the Kickstart scheme. So we had a lot of noise about the Kickstart scheme. We had very little information at my previous webinars on how the Kickstart scheme is actually going to work. We've finally got some guidance, we've got some help to be able to share with you. I know we have sent out some information, but as always, as part of my Friday afternoon webinar, let's have a look at how the Kickstart scheme is going to work, how you can apply for it, and how you can make it work for your business. So the Kickstart scheme is open to all employers across the UK. It will cover 100% of national, I'll put my teeth in today, national minimum wage for minimum of 25 hours for individuals between the ages of 16 and 24. You should not require people to take extensive training before they start the job placement. Okay, so the scheme is available, but there are qualifying requirements for the placement scheme. So the Kickstart scheme is to create a 6-month placement, a job placement for young people, and it is aimed at people who are currently on universal credit and who are at risk at long-term unemployment. Now, this particular scheme is going to be managed and monitored through Hmrc and the Department of Work and Pensions. So again, this is how this scheme is going to be monitored and managed. So the job placement should support the candidates to develop their skills and experience, which will be able to put them in a much better position when the placement comes to an end, that they will be able to find work after completing the scheme, whether that will be work with yourselves or whether it will be work elsewhere. So any organisation, regardless of size, can apply for funding for the Kickstart scheme. Job placements that are created for the Kickstart scheme must not replace existing roles. It must not be used for planned vacancies. So if you were planning to have these vacancies prior to COVID, you should not be using the scheme to fill that vacancy. And you must not cause existing employees or contractors to lose out on working hours. So you mustn't use the Kickstart scheme to offset where employees or contractors who are perhaps in work on reduced hours to put them at a disadvantage. So it really is, it's a new role, it is there to make sure that you are, it is a new role that it is not currently being performed by existing staff. Again, how do you apply? So you can apply for the grant, for the funding. Again, it's an application that is done online. Now, the big thing that came in through this is that you as an organisation can apply yourselves directly online if you have got 30 or more job placements. If you do not have 30 or more job placements, you need to find a partner who is going to be able to work with you. So, and it may be a number of partners, organisations, to be able to get that minimum 30 job placement threshold. If you Hmrc UK are one of those partners that you can use. We have got organisations, we have got in excess of 30 job placements that we want to put forward. So if you are looking for it and you only have 1 or 2 job placements that you want to use, do get in contact with us and we will manage that process for you. But of course, if you're going to be making 30 or more job placements, you can do that yourselves. The requirements, the information that is going to be required will be the same whether you are going to be using a partner organisation who is going to be managing it on your behalf, or whether you are going to be doing it yourself. So the information that you are going to need when you make the application, or information that we will need when we make the application on your behalf, you will need to have your company house reference number, or if you are a charity, you will need to have your charity commission number. You will need to have your organisation address and some contact details as to who the person is going to be responsible for overseeing it. You will also need to be able to provide details of the job placements and their location. So bigger organisations may have it in different locations, but obviously if it's at one location, it'll just be that one location where the job is going to be carried out. You will need to provide supporting information. So the supporting information that we will need to know is primarily to make sure that it is a new job, and that it's not a job that is going to be replacing existing roles or planned vacancies, or causing existing employees or contractors to lose out by reducing their employment. And you can do this in a number of ways. You can tell us about the changes that have been made to your workforce. You can have a look over the last 6 months, and you can put together a business justification as to why you believe that having a job placement is going to work for your business, and also going to work for the individual itself. You will need to have a look at the number of people who have been affected by the changes in your workforce in the last 6 months, as well as the size of your overall workforce. So again, having a look at that. You would need to sort of have a look at the kinds of roles you have, the functions and the average salaries that you were paying people. Perhaps you made people redundant, or people who had their hours reduced over the last 6 months. And you would be able to create these job placements. Give it some thought whether you'd be able to create these placements if you did not have the funding for the Kickstart scheme. And if you didn't have the funding, what funding resource you would use to be able to implement the scheme. So again, it's giving it some thought as to how the scheme is going to benefit your business, but in turn you need to make sure that you will be able to provide a benefit back to the individual who is going to be joining your organisation. So you would also need to consider things like what recruitment you have completed. Perhaps you started a recruitment process that had to be paused in the last 6 months. There might be various sort of things that you had in the pipeline which have been changed because of COVID-19. Have a look to see whether the job roles are similar to existing or planned roles, and if there are, it's not going to prevent you from being able to put that role forward for the job Kickstart scheme funding, but you'll be able to explain why you're using the scheme to fund to create similar roles. So again, it's about justifying that using the scheme. So not only are you going to have to provide information about why you need the funding, but you're also going to need to provide information how the organisation is going to be helped and develop the employability and skills of young people. So this is, giving back to young people so that they can go on and get jobs elsewhere after their 6-month placement has come to an end. And you can do this by providing information on what sort of help and support will be provided. So for example, you might say at the end of the placement you'll be helping them with writing their CV or preparing them for an interview, so going through the interview process. You will need to provide information on when that support is going to be provided. So using my example of writing CV and interview techniques, you may want to say, well, that's going to be offered halfway through the placement, or it's going to be offered at the end of the placement. So again, you need to give a timescale of when you are actually going to be providing that support. Give an indication on how long it's going to take. Is it going to take a couple of hours? Is it going to take a couple of days? And who is going to be providing that support? Of course, HR for UK can help you with all of these as part of the support that we will be able to provide you. You'll also need to give a little bit of an indication on how you're going to monitor the support that you are going to be giving the candidates to ensure that they have an enjoyable time, whilst they are on their placement, and what they can expect at the end of their job placement, because it will come to an end after 6 months. You need to give some thought on how the candidate can give back feedback to you, both during their placement and after their placement, and how you will use that information to improve it going forward. So again, it's got the sense and the feel of normal recruitment, normal activities that you will have around an employee to make sure that you keep them motivated, engaged, at the same time learning to make sure that they are best placed when their placement comes to an end to be able to get gainful employment afterwards. Hopefully it's with yourselves, but if not, you've put them in a good position to be able to find employment after that 6-month placement. So the funding available is, as I've already mentioned, is 100% of national minimum wage for a minimum of 25 hours. Obviously, if they're going to be working more than 25 hours, you as the employer will need to top that up, so do bear that in mind. There is also additional funding of £1,500 available for each job placement to help you as an organisation to set up the support and the training, as well as perhaps paying for uniforms and other setup costs. So as an organisation, you will have the additional funding. So for example, you may need to buy a laptop, you may need to implement some infrastructure that's going to cost you. You will be able to get funding up to £1,500 per job placement. So that could be quite helpful to help you get that individual in, and it will also help you pay for additional support that you may need to provide at the end of the placement. So once you know you've got all that information together, the application process will begin. All applications will be checked to make sure that they meet the requirements of the Kickstart scheme. So those are all the things that I've just discussed with you to make sure that you can satisfy those requirements. It will then go to a panel for consideration. Now, it's not a competitive process. The Kickstart scheme will only provide funding if the job placement satisfies the criteria. It's not a case of, oh, we've got 100,000 admin roles available, so only 100,000 schemes will be placements will be allowed. That is not the case. It is, the funding will be there, it will be available as long as the job placement meets the criteria. So quite important to make sure that you do that. If the application is successful, you will receive a letter with an agreement containing information about the grant. The grant agreement will include information about what your company has agreed to provide, how much funding you will receive from the Kickstart scheme. Of course, you will need to sign and return the agreement, and all of this will need to be done before the job placements can begin. So there's quite a bit of admin work that needs to be done beforehand, before the job placements can actually start. So you will need to provide job descriptions for each job placement that you have applied for, and this will include information about what the candidate will need to do to apply for the job. So, will they need to go through an assessment? Will they have specific requirements that they need? For example, will they need a driver's license? Will they need to have specific computer skills? So information like that the candidate will need to know about making the application. Once all that information has been submitted and provided, you will then will be contacted by young people who have been matched with your job placement. So there will be a matching scheme that is put in place. That doesn't mean you don't have the choice on who you want to employ, because that choice still remains with you, because it's got to be the right person for your organization. So you do still have input on who you actually take on at the job placement. It does remind me a little bit of a graduate scheme, where everybody's going to apply, but the decision is down to you. So, as I said, candidates will be able to apply for the job placement, and you can choose who you take on. You will only receive the funding if you appoint a young person that the DWP have introduced to you. As I mentioned right early on, it is through the DWP. So if you are taking on a young person through a job board, for example, you will not qualify. So it is through a very, very managed scheme, and it is through the DWP to make sure that we are targeting those young people between 16 and 24, those who are on universal credit and those who are at risk at long-term unemployment. So, it's quite a targeted group of individuals. So how will the funding be paid? So 100% of the national minimum wage for 25 hours per week will be paid to you, as well as the employer national insurance contribution, as well as the employer automatic enrolment contribution. So the government is really funding quite a bit under this scheme. The DWP will use information from Hmrc to check that the young person is still employed, and the grant, the payment will be paid in arrears. So again, you will need to make the payment first, and it will be paid to you after the payment has been made. The DWP will again have measures in place to check to see how the scheme is going to making sure that the individual is getting what you have promised. So they will contact the young person, or they may contact you to see how it's going on, to check that the employability support has been offered, and to make sure that the young person is getting the best experience that they possibly can. So that's all the information I have about the Kickstart scheme, and I'm very conscious that we've got to 4 o'clock, and I'm just going to touch very briefly on what options are available, what next. I am then going to go to the questions, but of course, if anybody needs to leave, by all means, there is a recording of this, so you won't miss out. So if you do need to leave, I won't be offended, and I will have a look at that. So let's just have a look at what are the options, what is open to businesses now. So obviously, we've got the new job support scheme, which is just a fraction of the support that we have seen over the past few months. But it is only for those viable jobs. So it's only for those jobs that are for people that are in work and just need the support over the next period of time to keep them. It's not designed for a substitute to the furlough scheme where there may or may not be a job at the end of it. It is really focused on, that there is a viable job, and it's for people who are in work. The new scheme obviously requires everybody to chip in, which is going to have a huge impact for many businesses in terms of cash flow, because they will have to make that payment up front. So again, you will need to have a look and consider whether your cash flow is going to be able to accommodate these changes going forward, certainly for the next 6 months. The support that is going to be there, yes, there is support, but we've got quite a long, challenging time that's going to be going through it. So some top tips on what you should be looking at, over the next couple of weeks. And I know a lot of you have been thinking about this for quite a long period of time already. Is carry out a full cost analysis to ensure that your business is going to be able to afford to make the contributions that are required if you are going to be participating in the job support scheme. Because if you are going to be putting an employee on the job support scheme, you cannot make them redundant while they are on the scheme and while the company is operating that scheme. So you can't take the employee off but still continue with the rest of the organisation on the scheme. So you really need to give it some considered thought whether you are going to be able to make that contribution. I would recommend that you carry out a review, a full review of your organization on all the roles to make sure that if you are going to use a scheme, particularly maybe the Kickstart scheme, that you will be able to provide, you make best use of that by providing the support that the young worker will require to make sure that they develop those skills so that they have that employability once the scheme comes to an end. So cost analysis and an organisation review on all the schemes is a good starting point. If you are thinking you are going to need to make redundancies, you need to act now, particularly if you want to take advantage of the furlough scheme, which comes to an end on the 31st of October. You can make staff redundant while you are under the furlough scheme, but you can't make staff redundant when you are on the job support scheme. So it's really, really important that if you are going to be making redundancies, if you're going to be making more than 20 redundancies, sorry, if you're going to be making more than 100 redundancies, you would have already have started that process because you would have had the minimum of 45 days consultation period. If you're going to be making 20 or more redundancies, but less than 100, you've got to go into that 30-day consultation process. And that date will start on Thursday, the 1st of October, if you want to still, start that consultation within the furlough scheme. So again, making sure that you start the redundancy process in time if you need to. Of course, if somebody is made redundant, they will be entitled to their redundancy pay, which will be calculated on their pre-furlough wages. And you can't use the furlough scheme to subsidise redundancy packages. And what I mean by redundancy packages, that is a statutory redundancy pay or enhanced payment, if that is what your business provides. You can, of course, use the furlough scheme for the notice period if the employee is notice is served. So again, it's really important that you try and maximise the furlough scheme for this last month as best that you can to the benefit of your business. We can't save every job, but what you can do as a business is look at the options that are available and make sure that you have the best use of what is available to make sure that your business comes out of this crisis. We do, of course, still have short-term working and layoff in the traditional form available to you, but you will need to weigh up the costs on what you are going to be doing for short-term working, because, of course, short-term working under the traditional terms, they have to be working at least less than half of their normal working hours. But you will still need to have a look at it, weigh up the costs, weigh up what is going to be more beneficial to you, bearing in mind the restrictions and the constraints that the job support scheme may have and may impact on the job support scheme in comparison to the short-term working layoff options. So there are options available to you. If you want to, we all know that we are coming to challenging times. If you just want to bounce some ideas off of someone, do get expert advice. Do speak to an expert who might be able to put a package together for you, where you use some of your staff on some scheme, some of your staff on another scheme, and make sure that it works for you. Don't feel you can't ask questions. Don't feel that you've got to muddle through it on your own. We are here to be able to help you. We are here to have a look at your organisation holistically to see how we can make these different schemes work for you, and also identify potential pitfalls that you may be exposed to that you may not have considered. Don't get it wrong. Don't do it on your own, particularly when there is help and guidance available to you. But the top tip, my big top tip for you to go away with, is carry out a full cost analysis. Carry out a full review of your organisation to make sure that whatever scheme you're going to be using, you qualify for the eligibility and you make sure that it works for you, because the best thing that you can get out of this is using the schemes to make sure that your organisation can prosper and come out of this crisis successfully. I am going to go on to the questions now, so thank you for being patient. I know I'm well over my time, but hopefully it would have been well worth it. I haven't lost too many viewers, so I do appreciate your patience. So let's have a look. So hi Angela, this is a question from Michelle. So hi Angela, if we can claim for the enhanced pay for maternity through furlough, what happens when they run out of SMP, which is statutory maternity pay, but receive full company pay whilst on maternity leave? Can you claim? I'm just trying to stretch this a little bit. This might be a complicated question, Michelle, and I might come to you separately on it, but it will, of course, have a full answer in the Q&As that come out. So the question is, can you claim the job support scheme on maternity leave, or does the employee have to work? Michelle, the devil is in the detail. My understanding is that the employee has to be in work, so it will not apply to those who are on maternity leave, because they have to be in work. They have to be working at least 33% of their time. So if they are on maternity leave, they're not working. So I don't think the scheme will be applicable for somebody who is on maternity leave. But Michelle, let me double check that. I will need to review it, and I will come back to you with a complete answer. Anybody who's ears have pricked up and thinking, oh, I'd like to hear the answer, don't forget we do send out the answers to the Q&A, so do look out for the answer to that question. So hopefully, Michelle, that gives you a little insight, but I will give you a more detailed answer. Heather, hopefully the audio issues were resolved. Dilesh, yes, I clarified, it is 60%, which I was talking about, and that of course referred to the reduction of the government contribution under the furlough scheme. Kiara, Kiara, you are asking how much is the government cap? Presuming you are talking about the government cap on the job support scheme. So if you bear with me, I'm just quickly going to flick through my notes. So the grant, the government cap is £697.92. So that cap on the government contribution under the job support scheme is £697.92. Again, I'll send out some guidance and more support on that. If I've referred to the wrong cap, do get back to me. In fact, if we are talking about the cap under the furlough scheme, that cap is £1,875. So that is under the furlough scheme. And of course, that is for the furloughed hours. So Kiara, hopefully I've answered your question, but if not, do drop us an email. But of course, the correct answers will come out in the Q&A. Heather has another question for me here. How affected casual staff, temporary staff, bank, no guarantee of hours, assume no guarantee of work does not apply to them either? That is a very, very interesting question, because of course this will have a huge impact on people who are on 0-hour contracts. So 0-hour contracts, of course, are for you get paid for the work that you require them to work. Again, I will need to look into the detail to look at the practical application of the support scheme. I don't believe that the support scheme will really benefit anybody who is on 0 hours, because of course when we are looking at their usual hours, that's normally a contractual term, their contractual hours. So again, there's a huge number of people who are going to not benefit from the job support scheme. But Kiara, I'll have a look at that, and I'll make sure that it's in the clear answers. As I said, devil's in the detail. If anything else comes in, it may change over time, but that's how I understand it at the moment. So I hope that answers that question for you. Caddy has asked a question. If an employer has, the question is, if an employer has an employee that only has 33% of the hours would like to top up their pay so that their take home is 100% of their pay. Is this something that is not possible under the scheme? No, it's not. So the whole purpose of the scheme is to have reduced hours with corresponding reduced pay, which is why you need to go through the consultation process to agree that change. If you as an employer are wanting to top up the wages, this scheme is not something that you will be able to use to get that little bit of contribution from the government. So if you are going to be topping up wages to 100%, you won't be able to use the scheme. But as I've caveated in my previous comment, you know, if the guidance comes out and is different and I've misunderstood it, I'll be the first to let you know, so to make sure that you can use the scheme. But certainly, as I understand it at the moment, it would not be possible. It is purely on a reduced hours, reduced wages scheme. Michelle, I've got loads of questions here. I'm going to do 3 more questions if that's okay with everybody, but I will send out the questions and answers to you during the course of next week, so you can have those answers. So Michelle has asked another question. Can you claim on the new scheme, stop and then serve a redundancy notice? No, you can't. So this is the whole question, is if you are going to be using the new scheme, you're going to be using it knowing that you're going to be using it for the long foreseeable future. You may, as an organisation, stop using it. So let's have a look at it as a worked example. If, for example, you use the scheme for the next 3 months and you just think, absolutely, I cannot continue with this, you will come out of the scheme, you will not make a claim, for example, in January, and you will start redundancy consultation process and you would be able to make redundancy, but you will not be able to claim for any other employee of your organisation, as I understand it, whilst you make that individual redundant. So again, this is why I'm saying you need to have a look at your organisation. Are the roles that you're going to be using the scheme for going to see you through the whole period? Again, the devil's in the detail. If my understanding I've misunderstood it and the guidance clarifies that, Michelle, I will come back to you and clarify that. The answer to that is you will need to come out of the scheme. You can't carry on with the scheme and serve notice and make people redundant. Jackie, your question is, if someone is moved from furlough to the new job support scheme, can you still claim the bonus scheme at the end of January? Absolutely, yes, you can, provided that the individual is still employed and you have submitted an RTI on the 31st of January 2021, and they have received a pay of at least £520 for that period. So yes, you can use the new job support scheme and make your claim for that job bonus in January, or you can make the claim in February, but you know, you can use the 2 schemes concurrently, which can be quite beneficial for businesses. Yes, you can. A definitive answer there for everybody. My last question is going to go to Posh. Posh, I know you've got quite a few questions, and Heather, I know you've got another question, and there are questions underneath there that I can't see. But Posh, I would just like to answer your last question. Oh, brilliant. Thank you for this amazing webinar. Would you please send me the example of Joe? I think you mean Beth. But I do have a number of worked examples which I will send out so you can get a flavour and a feel to see how that is going to work. So Posh, I'll definitely send that out to you. Because you have another question, you're talking about the job scheme, so that's a typo that's come afterwards. So brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. I've certainly turned into a pumpkin. For those of you who've stayed on, thank you very much for listening to me. Do send those questions in to info@hrforuk.com. Do contact us if you have any questions that you want to discuss over the phone. Telephone number is 01455 444 222, and of course that all important website www.hrforuk.com. Don't try and struggle through this on your own. Help is available. I'm so passionate about making sure that businesses succeed, and I can see a real opportunity for many organizations. Let me help you to organize your organization using the various schemes so that you can come out of this profitable and successful, so that we can kickstart 2021 when we get to the new financial year, that you can springboard to go forward. Thank you very much, everybody. I've kept you long enough, so have a fantastic weekend. I will see you all again at our next webinar, which I will tell you about in a minute. I almost forgot. Is on. It will be on October. I'll find it in a minute. So it's going to be Friday, the 9th of October, same time, 3 to 4 p.m. And the topics that I'm going to be covering will obviously be a recap on anything that may have changed in the interim period. But I'm going to be talking about overcoming the challenges of remote workers and motivating staff in the current situation, particularly those who are maybe coming off a furlough, maybe those who are putting onto the job support scheme. Maybe they're feeling a little bit vulnerable. I have some great top tips for you. So until then, goodbye. Thank you very much and stay safe, and I'll see you on the 9th of October. Thank you, everybody, and bye for now.